Welcome to Fly Tying with Whiting, where each month we'll bring you a fly pattern tied by one of our experts using whiting fly tying feathers. Whiting has a diverse line of feathers that serve many purposes in fly tying, and our intent here is to help you understand some of the many uses for whiting fly tying feathers. Whiting genetic fly tying feathers can help you tie better flies and be more successful out fly fishing. For this month's pattern, I'm going to tie an Adams. This is a pattern I've fished since I was a young kid. I bought my very first fly, which was an Adams pattern, at the Sardine Lake Lodge in the Sierra in California. And I fished this pattern off a 5.5-foot spinning rod, and when the wind was right, I could get it pretty near out 10 feet to a willing brook trout in a small mountain stream. Ever since, the Adams has been a favorite pattern, and I've fished it in a lot of places. I use it a lot for calabatus hatches. I use it when I'm just float tubing in area lakes. The fly was originally tied by a gentleman in 1922 from Michigan, so this pattern has been around an awfully long time, and it has stood the test of time. So let me cover the materials list for this pattern. I will review them one by one so you get an idea of the specific materials I've chosen for this fly. For a hook, I'm going to use a Firehole 419 in size 14. This is a barbless competition dry fly hook that I really like for this pattern. For the thread, I've got 16-aught Vivas in black, and I like this because it's a really fine thread and it doesn't build up bulk on the fly, and yet it's very strong. For the wings, I'm going to use a whiting Hebert Minor wet fly hackle. This is a hen cape, and the feathers are a little bit more webby, and they give a nice silhouette on this pattern once it's tied on the hook. For the tail, I'm using whiting Coq de Leon, which is a feather that's very stiff and it holds up well to the rigors needed by a tail on a classic dry fly. I've got this in natural Pardo, and you'll see in the picture it's got a little speckling to it that makes it an excellent choice for this pattern. For the abdomen, I've got superfine dry fly dubbing, and it's in Adams Gray. This will allow me to build a nice tapered body on this pattern. And lastly, for the hackle, I'm going to use one brown whiting dry fly saddle hackle and one whiting grizzly saddle hackle. And I'm going to marry these two together and tie them on together and wind them for the hackle on this fly. I use whiting dry fly saddles because they're the best in the world for dry flies. So let's get started on this fly pattern. I'm going to tie on my thread right at the 2/3 point of the hook. And setting proportions is really important on dry flies, and so I'll begin setting those proportions with my thread tie-in. Next, I've chosen 2 hackles off my hen grizzly cape, and I'm going to oppose them so they flare outward, and then I'm going to pull the barbs right back to the point where I want to tie them in. I'm going to pull these back and then place the thread gently over these and then tie them tightly in place. Next, I'll tie a series of supporting wraps right in front of the wing to prop those wings straight upright. And then I'll do a figure 8 through the middle of the wings to go ahead and part them and set them in place. And if I've got a stray barb, I can just clip those out of the way at this point. Next, I've taken about a half-inch grouping of Coq de Leon barbs, and I'm going to pull them together, set proportions on the hook, and then clip off the excess before I tie this on. And then I'll go ahead and tie it on right behind the wing and tie that back to the tail set position. And straighten up those barbs just slightly. Next, I'm going to tie in my dubbing material, and I'll grab a light group of dubbing, and I'm going to twist this onto the thread and catch just a few fibers onto the hook as I tie this on, and then wrap that thread like yarn around, or wrap the fibers around the thread like yarn. And I'll begin to wind this, and I'll wind back to the tail set, and then I'll wind forward to create a tapered body. I had a few extra fibers on this, and so I wound it all the way to the wing. And that's okay, because I'm going to wind backwards and ultimately hackle over this area, so that'll get covered up. The last step on this fly is to hackle it. And I've taken my grizzly saddle and my brown saddle, and I've married them together dry fly style. I'm going to tie this with the shiny side back and the dull side forward, tie it in right there at the section right behind the wing, and then I'll wind forward up to the head of the pattern. And I'm going to immediately start winding these two feathers together. You can wind them one at a time, but if you keep them tightly married together, they'll wind perfectly forward. And so I'll wind two complete wraps behind the wing and two wraps in front of the wing. To tie this off, I've pulled the feathers upright, crossed them with the thread, and then pulled the hackles back to me and cross the thread only on the stem, and that's so I don't catch a lot of the barbs as I'm tying this off. And I'll clip off the excess. After I've tied off the hackles, I can clip any stray barbs that are not where I want them. And then I'll whip finish this and finish up the pattern. So let me rotate the fly in the vise so you can see this pattern from all sides. So that has been your Tying with Whiting fly pattern for this month. I hope you've enjoyed the Adams fly pattern, and we'll give this one a try. I know I sure like to cast it over willing brook trout in a high mountain lake. If you've liked this video, please subscribe to the Whiting Farms YouTube page. Thanks for watching.